Police watchdog investigating a police-involved shooting in Regina, sabotage attempt discovered at EV battery plant construction site in Quebec. U.S. Supreme Court denies Omar Khadr's appeal. Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi dies in helicopter crash. The ICC issues a warrant for the arrest of Israeli and Hamas officials, and Julian Assange granted permission to appeal U.S. extradition. Good morning. It's Tuesday, May 21st. I'm Nora. Here are your headlines. Saskatchewan's police watchdog, the Serious Incident Response Team, is investigating a police-involved shooting in Regina. The watchdog posted a statement saying it was investigating a quote-unquote officer-involved shooting. The Regina Police Service posted on social media Sunday that they were investigating what they called a quote-unquote serious incident involving their SWAT team. Other than that, the details of the case are slim. The Toronto Star reports that Doug Turnbull, a man who lives on the block where the investigation is taking place, said that he heard gunshots but mistook them for a vehicle backfiring. The paper also reported that the watchdog said it would be able to share more details on Tuesday. So you can look that up today. Next, there's been some sabotage at the proposed site of one of Canada's newly promised EV battery plants. Of course, as sabotage isn't really an Ontario thing, it's in Quebec. Stéphane Blais from the Canadian Press is reporting that unexploded incendiary devices were found at the construction site for the Northvolt plant in Saint-Basile-le-Grand, east of Montreal. They were found on May 6th, but last Thursday, a group claimed responsibility at the website Montreal Counter Information. The group is opposed to the site, both for its environmental impact in Saint-Basile, but also due to the increased lithium mining that will accompany the project in Quebec's north. The group who took responsibility for planting the devices wrote this, quote, "If there's one takeaway to share, when choosing materials, consider how weather, high humidity or rain, might decrease the chances of the device igniting. The longer the timer, the longer the device will be exposed to environmental factors, thereby decreasing the window of success." Unquote. There have also been nail-studded belts placed at the construction site, and trees set to be cut down were loaded with nails and iron bars intended to harm anyone who tried to remove them. Next, the U.S. Supreme Court has denied Omar Khadr's appeal to have his convictions for the 2002 murder of an American soldier in Afghanistan and other crimes he committed at age 15 to be vacated. The court denied Khadr because it had said he waived the right to an appeal in 2010 before a U.S. military commission. His lawyers had argued that a subsequent ruling by the Federal Appeals Court called into question whether or not he would have been present at the time of the crimes. Khadr was one of the youngest detainees to be held in Guantanamo Bay. He was tortured there, like many detainees were, and was held for 8 years. When he arrived in Canada, he was held in prison for 3 years until he was granted bail in 2015 by an Edmonton judge. In 2017, the Supreme Court of Canada condemned the federal government for its mistreatment of Khadr, and he was granted a $10.5 million settlement from Ottawa for his mistreatment while held as a minor in Guantanamo. Turning now to Iran. Iranian authorities confirmed that President Ibrahim Raisi and Foreign Affairs Minister Hossein Amir-Abdollahian were killed in a helicopter crash on Sunday. They had just been at the Azerbaijani border to inaugurate the Kiz-Kalasi Dam. After hours of searching by rescue teams, the crash wreckage was found early Monday morning. Raisi's death was confirmed by Vice President Mohsen Mansouri, who is expected to take over as president. Raisi took office in 2021. During his presidency, he ordered a tightening of morality laws. He oversaw violent crackdowns on anti-government protests, including the killing of 500 protesters during the uprisings that took place in 2022 and 2023, following the killing of Mahsa Amini. He will be remembered by many as the quote-unquote butcher of Tehran for ordering the deaths of 5,000 Iranian prisoners in 1988, most of them teenagers. Next, Karim Khan, the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, said that he is seeking warrants for the arrest of several Israeli and Hamas officials over the genocide in Gaza and the attacks on October 7th. Khan is seeking warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, and 3 Hamas leaders. Yahya Sinwar, Mohammed Daif, and Ismail Haniyeh. This marks the first time the ICC has gone after a U.S. ally. Israel is not a member of the ICC, and neither is Qatar, which is where Hamas's political leadership spends most of its time, though Hamas had agreed to be members of the ICC when the Palestinian state applied for membership. Even though Israel is not a member of the court, a warrant for the arrest of Netanyahu and others would make it difficult for them to travel for risk of arrest. Several members of the Israeli government criticized the decision, and Joe Biden called it, quote-unquote, outrageous. Hamas also criticized the decision, saying that, quote, it equates the victim with the executioner, unquote, and defended its right to resist Israeli occupation, including through armed resistance. And finally, Julian Assange has been granted permission by London's High Court to have a fresh appeal against his extradition to the U.S. He will be able to challenge the Americans' assurances about how a trial there would be conducted. Assange has been wanted in America to face charges of leaking military secrets. His lawyer, Edward Fitzgerald, has argued that they should not accept the Americans' promise that Assange would be able to rely on rights and protections given under the First Amendment. Fitzgerald has said that the U.S. courts would not be bound to that because they could argue that the First Amendment does not apply to Assange since he is an Australian national. His lawyer did accept a separate assurance, though, that Assange would not face the death penalty if he went to trial and was found guilty. There has been increasing pressure on Joe Biden to drop the case against Assange brought forward under Trump. The U.S. president had indicated that he would consider dropping the case at the request of the Australian Parliament. Assange faces 17 charges of espionage and 1 charge of computer misuse, which in total could lead to a sentence of 175 years in prison. His website, WikiLeaks, had published classified U.S. documents almost 15 years ago. Those are your headlines for Tuesday, May 21st. I'm Nora. You're listening to this podcast at sandynora.com, on the Real News Network podcast feed, and anywhere you get your podcasts. You know, it's Tuesday. It's Sandy and Nora Day. You're not going to want to miss this episode. We talk about a lot of things, including identity politics and how identity politics are being used to try and silence and marginalize critics of Israel. It's out in a couple of hours, so keep listening.